understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע ושפתי מדבר מרמה ולמחללי נפשי תדום ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה אלוהי אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע ושפתי מדבר מרמה ולמחללי נפשי תדום ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה אלוהי נצור לשוני מרע ושפתי מדבר מרמה ולמחללי נפשי תדום ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה
Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach. We're so happy that you are joining us tonight. This most unusual way of gathering for Sukkot, our beautiful outdoor harvest festival. I hope that at some point over the next 7 days, you get some time to enjoy nature's bounty. As you can probably tell, I am greeting you from the beautiful Sukkah here on the back property of Westchester Reform Temple's campus. It's one of 2 Sukkot, nature booths, that we have built for this festival. There's another one on the other side of the property, and throughout the week, people young and old will be gathering at a safe distance in the Sukkah to participate in this beautiful holiday and all of its associated rituals. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Blake. I'm joined tonight in their homes by Rabbi Daniel Rieser and Cantor Danielle Rodnitsky, and we want to share with you a little bit of the spirit of Sukkot. So later on, you'll be hearing from me, and I'm going to do a little bit of teaching around some of the mystical meanings associated with this holiday. Tonight I want to talk about, just briefly as a way of getting ourselves in the appropriate frame of mind for Sukkot, the 2 themes of this holiday, which are actually opposites. It's a paradox. Sukkot, on the one hand, is about abundance. Look around and I'm surrounded by all of nature's beauty. I can see the sky. By the time our service ends, the sun will have set and a full moon will fill the sky. Its light and the light of the stars will shine, and I'll be able to see it all from inside this sukkah. You can probably hear some road noise too, also on Mamaroneck Road. Sukkot is a time to celebrate nature's bounty. It's the harvest season. We're surrounded by fruit and flowers and all the living things that grow and provide us with nourishment and sustenance. But paradoxically, Sukkot is not only a time to appreciate what we have, it's also a time to acknowledge lack and loss, fragility, instability. The whole point of a sukkah, of dwelling inside of these nature huts, is that we might recognize that, like these structures, our lives are also impermanent. For the 7 days of Sukkot, we read from the biblical book Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes, whose most famous words are probably known to you. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. We reckon with our own mortality. We recognize that even the beautiful green lulav, which I'll lift up a little bit later on, in just a few days will wither and fade. All of these flowers will change from bright yellow and red to gray and brown. And so on the one hand, we have abundance and gratitude. On the other hand, we have lack, fragility, and wistfulness. And the human condition is actually a kind of intermingled thread, a yarn that blends both themes. So on this Sukkot, how will you reckon with abundance on the one hand, mortality on the other? It seems to me that there's never been a more appropriate time in our lives to have a Sukkot for wrestling these themes. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. If you have candles in your home and you would like to join me in lighting these candles to welcome both Shabbat and Sukkot, I invite you to do so now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov v'shel Shabbat. Amen.
One of the ways we get ready for Shabbat is by singing together. And despite not being able to gather in person with Rabbi Blake in the Sukkah, we feel like we are with you and with one another. And so we're going to sing Hine Matov, how wonderful it is that we can dwell together during this holiday of Sukkot, that we can feel like we're together even when we are physically apart. Hine Matov. Hine Matov u'manayim Psalm 92 is our psalm for Shabbat, and the psalm begins with these words, Tov lehodot Adonai, it is good to give thanks to Adonai, and what better time than Sukkot to express some gratitude. And so we're going to sing together the second part of the psalm, Tzadik Katamar. Tzadik Katamar. we continue with the Baruch Hu, our call to continued worship.
Ma'ariv Aravim is a prayer that gives thanks for the changing of the seasons and the changing of the time. We say, "Blessed are you, Adonai, who causes the sun to go down and causes evening to rise, who makes all of the many colors that fill our world in the fall, the oranges and yellows and browns that come on the trees, and also are a symbol of change, a sign of impermanence." And Sukkot too celebrates this same thing, all of the amazing and beautiful things in nature that remind us that everything in life is fleeting, no matter how much we might like to hold on to this particular moment or this particular day. But Ma'ariv, Aravim, and Sukkot share something else in common, and also something that is in some ways spiritually more heartening. I was having a conversation just earlier today with a congregant who was saying, "It's been such a rough 6 months. I don't even know where to turn anymore to find comfort and solace." And then they said, "But one place that I continue to find happiness and joy is when I'm able to step outside of my own little box, able to get out of our house, be outside in nature, and be reminded that actually even in this world where a lot of things are challenging and hard, and even where everything is impermanent, that being outside can make us feel at one with nature and maybe even with the universe or with God." And so we offer these ancient words of blessing. We say, "Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim." Blessed are you, our eternal God, who reminds us that in nature we are indeed one as you are one. Please join me in the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha. Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim lelohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Throughout the year, we have special melodies that pop up for Mi Chamocha, and that's because Mi Chamocha has become the prayer that we use to help signal the special melodies that are coming for the holiday or the time or the season of the year. So you might remember from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which we just experienced together, not virtual, as Rabbi Blake said. You might remember Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai. That's the special tune for the high holidays, and just like the high holidays, Sukkot has its own special tune, which we'll sing together tonight. Our next prayer, Hashkivenu, is our evening prayer where we ask God to protect us and keep us safe throughout the night. And especially on Sukkot, we wanted to point out to you that there's this beautiful line of liturgy within the prayer that says, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, spread over us the shelter of your peace. And then the very end of the prayer, which you can see now on the screen, says, Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, our God, the spreader, the one who spreads a sukat shalom, a sukkah of peace and wholeness over us, over all of God's people, Israel, and over all of Jerusalem. And so we're going to sing this prayer together. Baruch atah, atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Baruch atah, atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, shalom aleinu
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת שבת וינף השבת, שבת וינפש. אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. Adonai, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Konei Hakol, ve'Zocher Chastei Avot ve'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. We now take a few moments for silent prayer.
So once again, Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach. I'm so happy to greet you from one of our two beautiful Sukkot, the sukkahs on the campus of Westchester Reform Temple. If you would like to spend a little bit of time in a sukkah this coming festival week, all you have to do is just come around to the back parking lot of Westchester Reform Temple and enter. We're going to say a few blessings now because Sukkot is a season of manifold blessings. The first blessing is a blessing that you can say only when you are in a sukkah. So even if you're at home and want to say this, you can think the blessing, but you can't validate your presence in a sukkah without actually being in a sukkah. As much as I'd like to be the proxy Jew for the whole community, you got to get yourself into a sukkah to say the following bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, le'shev basukkah. We thank the eternal source of life who makes our lives holy through the commandments of our tradition, instructing us to sit or dwell in a sukkah. I'm so happy to dwell in this sukkah. I want to accompany that prayer by one that will be familiar, that we can all say for having reached this Sukkot in health and joy. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Thank you, source of life, for giving us our lives, sustaining us, and enabling us to reach this beautiful harvest season. And then finally, the prayer that we're about to say will lead us into the ritual that is most closely associated with this holiday, the waving of the lulav. So I'm holding in my hand lulav, which is comprised of three species, three of the four species that are required to celebrate Sukkot in the fashion of the Jewish tradition. Starting with the Torah and then elaborated in the rabbinic tradition. You can see that the lulav is comprised of these three branches. There's the very tall, spiny and spiky palm branch. And to this side, my right, I don't know if that's my right, it's my right, maybe your left, the poor weeping willow, which has dark green leaves, but it will fade and wither and desiccate. It will dry out very, very fast. And the somewhat more hardy myrtle branch, which has a delicious sweet fragrance. The willow having no fragrance, the date palm also no fragrance, but produces a delicious and tasty fruit. So these three together comprise lulav. It's customary to hold a lulav. If you have one, you can take it out now in your right hand. And in the left hand, you hold the etrog. And when you say the bracha, you actually hold the etrog this way, with the green stem at the top and the distinctive brown pitum or nodule or doohickey, thingamabob, whatchamacallit, at the bottom. And the prayer we say is as follows. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, al nitilat lulav. Thank you, God, for giving us commandments that enrich and sanctify our lives, and instructing us in the ways of taking up and waving lulav. Now, in a moment, we're going to wave the lulav, but first I'd like to do a little bit of teaching around the waving of lulav. And this comes to us by way of the Kabbalistic tradition. Jewish mysticism, or Kabbalah, is a spiritual discipline that goes all the way back to antiquity, but finds, I think, its fullest expression at two different times in the story of the Jewish people. First, in the 13th century, upon the publication of the Zohar, which is the chief work of Jewish mysticism. It's basically an elaborate metaphor about the entire meaning of existence, told as a commentary on the Torah. And even though it presents itself as a much earlier work, a work of an ancient rabbi, Shimon Bar Yochai, who together with his son were secreted out in a cave during the Bar Kokhba uprising in the 2nd century, the Zohar is actually a work written by a rabbi in Spain in the 13th century. That rabbi remains anonymous to us, though some have conjectured his identity. The second great flowering of Jewish mysticism, or Kabbalah, comes a few centuries after the publication of the Zohar and is led by Rabbi Isaac Luria, or he's sometimes called the Arizal, which means the lion, Rabbi Isaac Luria of blessed memory. So the Ari, or Arizal, provides us a mystical understanding that goes down in Jewish history as Lurianic Kabbalah, the form of Jewish mysticism that is named for Isaac Luria. And it is Lurianic Kabbalah that infuses so many dimensions of Jewish life, perhaps even without your awareness. When we sang Lecha Dodi earlier this evening, and we stood up at the end, turned to the entrance of our place to welcome the Sabbath bride, that metaphorical conception of the Sabbath as a wedding between the Jewish people and the divine is part of Lurianic Kabbalah. If you've ever heard of something called Tikkun Olam, the idea that the Jewish responsibility is to be a partner with the divine in restoring the brokenness of the world to wholeness, that idea comes to us from Lurianic Kabbalah. And Lurianic Kabbalah also presents us with a map of the way in which God flows from the ineffable beyond, the great Ein Sof, or the God that is nothing and yet everything, flows into the world and is made manifest through certain expressions of God, not one of which encapsulates the totality of the divine, but each one of which gives us a little bit of a window or a taste or an experience of the totality of divinity. If you've ever seen something that looks kind of like this funky little map with a hexagon in the middle and all these Hebrew terms, and each of the terms is drawn inside of a bubble, this is a map of the Sefirot, or the different attributes of God that emanate out of nothingness and fill the world with divinity. And it is that chief concept of Lurianic Kabbalah that informs Isaac Luria's understanding of the true meaning of the waving of the lulav. So I want to start with the shape of the lulav itself. Luria observed that the lulav is shaped like the way we draw a Hebrew letter. And it's not a final nun. The letter is a vav, a tall, straight line. Vav is the sixth letter of the alphabet, and therefore also carries the numerical significance of 6. And Luria taught us that the point of waving the lulav is to call upon 6 core attributes of the divine, and then there's going to be a 7th that we will add when we bring the etrog together with the lulav. We take 6 core attributes of God, and we actually summon those attributes and allow them to be internalized within us, within our bodies, within our thoughts, within our hearts, within our souls, as personality traits. So here's where I do need to rely on my notes a little bit, because this is where things get a little bit technical. So Luria points out that when we wave the lulav to the south, which happens to be in this direction, because east is that way for me, toward the sanctuary. I always know that our sanctuary faces east. South is behind me. West is to my left, toward Mamaroneck Road. North is forward, which is toward White Plains. And then, of course, up and down are the 6 directions in which we wave the lulav. And Luria points out that the direction to the south of us, so starting behind me, corresponds to the attribute of chesed in Hebrew, or kindness. So when we wave to the south, we are drawing upon God's kindness. But when we wave to the north, we invoke an opposite attribute. Because if only God's kindness filled the world, there would be compassion everywhere, but maybe we would live forever, there would be perfect joy, but there would be no creative tension. With only creation and no destruction, the world does not exist. So Luria proposes that the opposite attribute that we call upon when we wave from the south to the north is God's gevura, which means judgment or strength. So we take compassion, gentleness, and kindness behind us, and then we invoke strength and judgment and justice in the opposite direction. Similarly, when we wave to the east, we invoke harmony, equanimity, being at one with the world, recognizing that we're just part of the great cosmos. But when we wave to the west, Luria proposes that we are calling upon the Kabbalistic attribute of, which one is it? Yesod, which means confidence in oneself, being grounded, not being connected to the rest of the world, but rather being fully confident and capable in ourselves and our own abilities. And then finally, Luria proposes that the other two directions in which we wave, first up, represents the quality of netzach, which means perseverance, the ability to push through. But its opposite quality when we wave down is hod, which corresponds to the idea of submission, of letting go, of letting what will be. And I would add, by the way, especially during this time of pandemic, we need equal measures. We need a balance of netzach, the ability to persevere, push through, keep on going despite the challenges and changes that we're confronting every day. And we need a strong measure of hod, that quality of submission, willingness to accept, to be serene in the what is. And so now we have a spiritual, emotional quality and personality trait that Luria proposes comes from God, surrounds us on 6 sides, to this side and that side, behind and in front, up and down. And if we invoke those qualities when we wave the lulav, we actually accomplish 2 things. One, we embody a sense of completeness. We take on these manifold attributes of the divine that fill the world and we bring them into our bodies, which is why the waving of the lulav needs to be a physical act. So we physicalize the spiritual. But there's also something else we're doing, because we're recognizing even as we take in these attributes, we are also acknowledging with gratitude the bounty, beauty, and abundance of the divine that surrounds us in every way, and that allows these qualities to be felt in our experience of the world. Now, I did mention that there was a 7th, and that, of course, is when we take the etrog and we bind it from our other hand to the lulav. And when we do that, the final custom with lulav and etrog, at least in communities that are influenced by Kabbalah, by Jewish mysticism, is to take the lulav and etrog and bring it to the heart. And in so doing, we invoke the 7th mystical quality of malchut. Malchut literally means sovereignty or governance. It comes from the word melech. But in Kabbalistic tradition, it actually means communication with the divine. So by taking the etrog and the lulav together to the heart, we complete our prayer. And of course, the Kabbalists were all about the number 7. If you've ever spent any time in the sanctuary at Westchester Reform Temple, you know that the governing concept or idea is the number 7. The way in which 7 throughout Jewish tradition, particularly in mysticism, represents completeness. Going back to the first week, where God completed the work in 6 days, but rested on the 7th, which brings the work of creation to completion, so too do we human beings through our communication with the divine, through our ability to be fully present in and of the world of which we are a part and which is part of us, we actually attain a kind of spiritual completion. So that's the ritual we're about to undertake. My questions for you are, what are you doing in your lives, and what could you be doing over these days of Sukkot to come into greater balance with yourself? Are you finding that perhaps because you are overly compassionate, that you find it harder to exercise strictness and strength and set boundaries? I know that a lot of people who can be like that. They're very good at giving and giving and giving, but they find themselves depleted. So what qualities do you need to invite in? You don't want to make yourself less compassionate. The real question is, if you think about this framework, what can we do to balance compassion with the quality of strength and justice? Similarly, if you're a kind of person who's always pushing forward, you've got to do more, you are driven, what could you be doing by way of accepting more submission into your life, more serenity, more acceptance of the what is? So that's the first question. What are you doing to achieve that Kabbalistic balance symbolized by the lulav and etrog in your lives? And what could you be doing over Sukkot? Secondly, what could you be doing and what can we do together to bring greater balance and creative harmony into the world of which we are a part and which is part of us. We are living things. The air I breathe is your air. The water I drink is connected to all the sources of waters underneath the ground and in every ocean and sea, and that is contained as vapor in the clouds and then condenses and falls as rain. How are we in balance or out of balance with nature? These are very important Sukkot questions. So as we now take up our lulav and etrog, I'm going to invite you, if you feel comfortable, you can stand, you can clasp your hands together, even if you're not holding an actual lulav and etrog, and we can join together in offering the waving of the lulav and etrog with a little bit more understanding of its meaning through the lens of Lurianic Kabbalah. Here we go. And I'm going to sing a prayer from the Hallel Psalms, the biblical psalms of praise that become part of the festival liturgy on Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuot. The words are Hodu Ladonai Ki Tov, which means give thanks to God, for the divine is good. Ki Leolam Chasdo, the divine's mercy is everywhere and in everything, truly encapsulating the themes of Sukkot. Here we go. I'm going to start by waving to the east, and then I'm going to go to the south, west, north, up, and down. And if you can find east where you are, you can do the same with me. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasdo, yomar na Yisrael, ki leolam chasdo. Yomru na veit Aharon, ki leolam chasdo. Yomeru na yirei Adonai, ki leolam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasdo. Yomar na Yisrael, ki leolam chasdo. Yomru na veit Aharon, ki leolam chasdo. Yomeru na yirei Adonai, ki leolam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasdo. Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much, Rabbi Blake, for that brilliant teaching and for doing it out there in the sukkah. We're so glad that we could join you there through the wonder of technology this evening. Our thoughts turn now to friends and loved ones who may be in need of a prayer for healing. And so if there's someone who you're thinking about this Shabbat who might benefit to know that there's someone out there who loves them and who cares about them, I invite you to draw them into your heart right now. You might picture their face in your mind's eye, or maybe even call up a favorite memory that you have with that person as we recite these names for whom the Westchester Reform Temple community is praying this week. We offer our prayer of healing for Mordechai Ben Yaakov, Deborah Kapnick, Nicole Shusey, Amelia Austin, Joyce Schertzer, Leah Greenspan, Aviva Tzila Bat Esther Bela, Dan Sokolov, Jeffrey Millman, Leslie Dubner, Chava Batsara, Eliyahu Chaim Ben Fradel, Sheila Fried, Tanya Romanoff, Yitzchak Yona Ben May, Yaakov Hirsch Ben Rachel, Malka Tzipora Bas Rachel, Tamar Bat Malka, Heschel Meir Ben Davida Chana, David Ze'ev Ben Fruma Etzel, Rabbi Eitan Hammerman, and other names that we have uttered privately, either in our homes or in our hearts. We invite you now to join with us in our prayer for healing, Misha Berach. The words can be found on the screens in front of us.
Of strength, who bless the ones
We continue now with Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu L'Shabeach L'Adon HaKol, Latet Gedula Leotzer Bereshit, Shelo Asanu Kewoyei Ha'aratzot, Velo Samanu Kemishpechot Ha'adama, Shelo Sam Chelkenu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam, Va'anachnu Koreim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
As Rabbi Blake mentioned, on Sukkot, we read words from the book of Ecclesiastes, the most famous of which are set to a tune by the Byrds in the 1960s, that there's a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to laugh and a time to weep, a time to dance and a time to wail, a time to celebrate and a time to mourn. But of course, those of us who've lived in the world know that there often are no clear divisions between the times in our lives. Oftentimes, the time of mourning abuts very close to the time for celebrating. And this Shabbat is an illustration and an expression of exactly that idea. We come to Shabbat with our hearts hopefully full of joy, but also aware that many of us are carrying pain, the pain of loss. And so now, as we offer these names of people whom we're remembering as a community, I invite you, when you hear the name of a loved one, to please rise in your place and to honor their memory. We remember first those most recently taken from us. We recall Jean Fahrenbaker, mother of Larry Fahrenbaker, Gail Zick, mother of Matthew Zick, Marcia Aberly, sister of Arthur Resnick, Isak Levanta, father of Sandra Oliver, Albert Sipsener, husband of Jill Spielberg, father of Reed and Griffin Sipsener, son of Rachel and Rob Sipsener, and brother of Mara Sipsener. Eugene Goldenberg, husband of Hannah Goldenberg, and father of Tony Bernstein and Bryn Peltz. Sheldon Traeger, husband of Marcia Traeger, father of Alan and David Traeger, and brother of Joel Traeger. Irene Fryman, mother of Hal Fryman and Anne Feynman. Martin Schiff, husband of Saya Schiff, father of Mike Schiff, and brother of Herb Schiff. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And on the yahrzeit, the anniversary of their death, we remember Rabbi Marcus Burstein, Edith Carlin, Harry Deutsch, Theodora Unger, Dina Dinner, Carl Dinner, Dorothy Duckstein, Philip Ellman, Robert Simon, Mosley Geverts, Fred Grossfeld, Betty Gross, Jennifer Guberman, Eleanor Guggenheimer, Jack Jacobs, Karen Jane Jolson, Samuel Kaplan, Jacob Koretsky, Sheldon Kay, Marion Coco, Minnie Last, Ruth Stoltz Lazar, Ella Leibowitz, Carl Leff, Pearl Levy, Jack Lorinsky, Howard Markovitsky, Howard Manel, Norma Pocker Rosenthal, Martin Rayfell, Gertrude Rodman, Charles Rosenbaum, Rita Rosenblum, Louis Rosenstein, Judith Rosenzweig, Sybil Ross, Sidney Schloss Jr., Leonard Szyczki, Harris Sufian, Mike Weisfeld, Leonard Weitz, Herman Wiesenthal. If there are any names to add to our memorial or any that I've inadvertently mispronounced, I invite you to say them now. Please join with me in the words of the Mourner's Kaddish, which give thanks for the gift of life. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Ulamei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shmei D'kudsha B'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba min Shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high cause peace to descend on us and on all those who mourn, to which we say, Amen. A few brief announcements before we conclude our service. There is so much going on at Westchester Reform Temple in the coming week. That's kind of the joy of being past the high holidays, is that all of our synagogue programming for the regular year gets to start up, and there's a lot to look forward to that's coming up. So I'll name just a few things, but please look at our e-communications to make sure you know everything that's going on. Our celebration of Sukkot continues tomorrow morning, first with an opportunity to do some learning at 9 a.m. via Zoom, and then to join us for our Sukkot Festival morning service at 10 a.m. That service will take place both live and in person for those who pre-register using Sign Up Genius, and also will be streamed over Zoom. So please join us tomorrow morning for Sukkot with study online at 9, and then a service that's both in person or online, depending on what you prefer, tomorrow at 10 a.m. We will continue our celebration of Sukkot throughout the week, but notably Tuesday at 5 p.m. is our Sukkot celebration for families with young children, Pizza in Your Hut. We hope you'll check your e-communications to learn more about how you can join with the rest of us in celebrating Sukkot in each of our own little huts and enjoy some pizza as well to celebrate this festival of booths, this festival of huts, Pizza Hut, as it were. Our adult education series continues on Thursday with Rabbi Blake teaching the Mishnah, Building Blocks of Jewish Life. That's this Thursday, October 8th it's listed here at 10:15 p.m., but I'm sure that meant to say 10:15 a.m. So please join us on Thursday at 10:15 a.m. for Rabbi Blake's continuing course on the Mishnah. And then, before you know it, there will be another Jewish holiday that comes next Friday evening with Simchat Torah. We hope that you'll join with us for not only our Shabbat service, but also our Simchat Torah Story Slam, where we'll hear congregants tell true stories in the style of The Moth. If you've ever heard that radio show, or if you joined us last year for our Story Slam, it promises to be a terrific night hearing congregants tell true stories about their lives. Please tune in at 6:15 for our celebration of Simchat Torah, our celebration of the Jewish people's love of stories, and for the hearing of some stories that come from our own congregants' lives. Cantor, shall we offer a blessing over something sweet in honor of Sukkot?
We shall, and we have an extra special blessing over the wine today in honor of it being both Shabbat and Sukkot. So stay tuned for special melody. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am veromemanu mikol lashon vekideshanu b'mitzvotav vatiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ahava Shabbatot limnucha umoadim lesimcha chagim uzmanim lesason et yom hashabbat hazeh ve'et yom chag hasukot hazeh zman simchatenu be'ahava mikra kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim kivanu vacharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim ve'shabbat u'moadei kodshecha be'ahava u'veratzon besimcha u'vesason hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabat ve'Yisrael ve'hazemanim.
Sorry.
Go ahead, amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen. I guess I got a little here on that amen. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
So if you're joining us here in the Zoom room, we'd love to bring you on screen to wish you Shabbat Shalom as we make motzi over our challah. So maybe I'll ask Cantor if you could help to bring some of these attendees up to panelists. While for the past many weeks, we've enjoyed the cooking and baking stylings of our rabbinical student intern, Ariel Milan Polisar. This week, Ariel is not with us, so we'll have to make do with the grocery store bought challah, which is still round at my grocery store. I don't know if your grocery store is back to braided. Please join with us as we give thanks for everything in our life that helps to sustain us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Chag Sameach.
Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.
Michelle.
Chag Sameach.
Everyone.
Love the live broadcast, Jonathan. Love our ace reporter on the spot.
Live work, like reporting news from.
It turned out.
So I feel like I'm doing news from 10 feet away.
Ufros aleinu sukat, sukat shelomecha. Ufros aleinu sukat, sukat shelomecha.
Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Chag Sameach.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.